we're now going for the big three elastic bands in the foot, the digital flexor tendons and suspensory ligament. And to show you them more clearly, I've changed the specimen. Now we can see the tendons. They really show up on this specimen. So let's start way back at the top. Attached to the back of the radius, the arm bone, you can see these large muscles. This is the deep digital flexor. And you can see running through the meat of the muscle all these white tendinous bands. So even though there's muscle tissue here, this muscle can still function passively as a spring because these tendinous bands can be stretched and relaxed without the muscle ever having to contract. A bit further out, it's not quite in the plane of section. I think this is a piece of it. This is going to be part of the superficial digital flexor, and its tendon's been cut, and we'll pick up the tendon again down here. But it is actually, as you can see down here, the superficial digital flexor tendon is quite thick. This one that's really thick, running all the way down, is the deep digital flexor tendon. And then down here we've got the suspensory ligament. So that's where they are, and now I'm going to go through each one in turn. Starting with the superficial digital flexor, its tendon runs down. Its tendon at the top is attached to the back of the radius by this elastic band, which I hope you can see right there. That's the upper check ligament, the radial check ligament. So the muscle can contract, and this can take tension. The animal can still stand with stress and strain on the superficial digital flexor, but the muscle can relax because the tension can go right through this check ligament. The tendon then runs down, down, here it is where we pick up it again. It goes around the fetlock and then goes out of the plane of its section to attach to the sides of these bones right here. So it doesn't go all the way to the coffin, it's attaching near the pastern joint. But as the digit goes this way, it's going to stretch this tendon out. Next to the superficial digital flexor, we have the deep. That's the one with all these tendons in. And here it is. You can see it's pretty much the width of my finger. It is a huge elastic band, saves a lot of energy. It comes all the way down. It comes past the fetlock. Here it is going over the sesamoid bones. It goes all the way down, all the way to the coffin joint. So it's crossing the navicular, and it's going to the coffin bone. I said coffin joint, I meant coffin bone, all the way to the coffin bone. And when the horse is standing, so any time the horse is standing, there's tension in this tendon because the fetlock is wanting to be stretched out. Fetlock is stretching this way, going to tense the digital flexor tendons, going to put pressure on the navicular bone. And one of the possible causes of navicular syndrome, caudal heel pain, is negative reaction of the bone to the constant pressure. And just the way the horse stands, it cannot take, unless it lifts its foot off the ground, it can never take weight off that navicular bone. So there's the two superficial and deep digital flexor tendons. The digital flexor tendon is also attached to the bone by this huge check ligament, and this is the distal or deep digital flexor check ligament, the lower check ligament. You can see, hopefully see this. I'll tilt it up. There we go. This is a fairly thick band, thick wide band, looks like a rubber belt. And what that means is the animal can stand with weight on its foot, and the fetlock can be extended, and there'd be tension in this tendon, but the muscle up here can relax because the check ligament's taking the strain. And if the check ligament takes too much strain when the animal's running, it can become inflamed, and that's where sometimes it gets cut. Okay. The third band, we've done superficial and deep and check ligament. The third complete band is the suspensory ligament, and that's this one right here. And in us, the suspensory ligament is a muscle. It's one of the muscles in us that when our fingers are splayed, helps pull our fingers back together. The horse obviously does not have fingers that it splays like that, so it gets rid of most of the muscles that do that, just keeps the one down the middle. This is the one down the middle, and it turns it into an elastic band. So as with these tendons, as the fetlock goes this direction under load, when the animal's got weight on the foot, all of these three are stretched out. And they're stretched out by different amounts because they're at different distances from the joints. The suspensory ligament goes to the proximal sesamoid bones, and then it changes direction and goes round the sides. It doesn't keep going straight, it goes round the sides and actually ends up here. But its action is continued through the sesamoid bones by this series of little ligaments right in here. And you might know these as the XYZ ligaments or the WYX ligaments, whatever. These are the distal sesamoidian ligaments. And what these do is connect the long pastern to the sesamoids to the suspensory ligament. So as the foot is going in that direction, it pulls on these, which pulls on these, which pulls on that. So this is one continuous elastic band. Major energy saver. And these are the ones that the horse primarily bounces off when it's running. And you can see that fetlock when the foot hits the ground, that fetlock's going to bend. And these tendons are so strong, I cannot bend. The fetlock's going to go this far, I cannot bend it this far, I cannot get it any further than that. And that just tells you how much force it takes to stretch these out to allow the fetlock to come around here. In a galloping thoroughbred, it's shown that the force on the foot is 2.5 times the body weight of the animal. And that translates into force in these tendons and ligaments. We've seen the anatomy of this wonderful lever system that stretches these tendons out, stores energy in them, and bounces the animal forward, but there's consequences for this. You may wonder why the frequency of injuries in the leg is much higher from the knee joint down in the front leg and the hock joint in the hind leg, and it's simply because of this wonderful system. One of the consequences of this system is that while it's saving energy, it's magnifying the forces on all of these things, because as the toe goes round, it now forms this great big lever, so the ground is still pushing upwards on this, but now it's got a heck of a lot of leverage because the fetlock's fully bent. So the fetlock's not straight, the fetlock's come round to here. The ground force pushing up this way has to be resisted by this. But the lever arms are such that the forces in these tendons are probably more than twice the ground force. So incredible forces in these tendons, incredible forces on the cannon bones. And we saw the cannon bones breaking like pieces of chalk, magnitude of forces. In the tendons, we get things like bowed tendons, so the superficial will bow, a high bow, middle bow, low bow. It's simply the fibers of the tendon being ripped apart, like tearing a piece of cloth or pulling a piece of string apart. The check ligaments are also vulnerable because they take a lot of stress. And if they're too short for the tendon, they take too much stress and get inflamed. So you get check ligament inflammation. What happens with the suspensory ligament? The ligament itself is vulnerable, but so are the proximal sesamoid bones. And why they're vulnerable, use this as an analogy. If you imagine this tendon, this is the suspensory ligament. If you imagine it being stretched really tight around a curve, do this with a piece of rubber, stretch it really tight, and when it's really, really tight, whack it with a hammer right there, and it will just like a piece of glass. And that is probably what's essentially happening with the sesamoids. When you've got all this force through the suspensory ligament, if those touch the ground hard, they're under so much tension the bone just splits across the middle. So this lovely springing system has negative consequences for the health of the animal, not only in terms of injuries, but chronic things like osteoarthritis of the joint surfaces themselves, because they're always operating under extremely high pressure